Hey, good morning everyone. Chris from Concord here. I'm going to show you guys how to take the solenoid out of a rear air spring. I'm getting ready to do that right now. First, there's a C-clamp on here that kind of holds the solenoid in place. First, you want to kind of take that puppy off. Use a screwdriver usually to get in here and try and get at it. It can be difficult at times trying to pop that thing out of there. Okay. All right, I got one side loose. Now for the other side. There we go. We got it popped off. That's this little puppy right here. That sits in the side of where the solenoid fits in, so it keeps it from rotating. Anyway, here we are. Now we got the clip out of the way. Everything's still connected. Don't worry about that. What you want to do first is to twist it counterclockwise. Now, before you do this, you want to get your face out of the way, because when it clears that first stop, it's going to pop. Here we go. That's it. That's the first pop. Now the air is released. You pull up, twist it one more time, and just remove the solenoid from the spring. Very easy. Now there is a big O-ring down here that's designed to be a stopper for the solenoid. It just doesn't hold air. It's just there to make a nice tight fit. But I'll just take that out of the way just for the time being. Well, that's the first part. See if I move on to the next. See, the next part of taking out the spring is to rotate this ring on top to unlock it from the top mounting bracket. Now there is a little lock spring in here. You have to push down on it, and then hopefully the thing will turn like it's supposed to. I can't really see it all that well, but this can be a pain in the ass sometimes. Okay, I depressed the lock clip and I got the ring to rotate, and now I can just pull the spring down off the mount. Now I got two bolts I got to take out of the lower control arm before I can take the spring out. Let's see here. Now that I move the camera around, I can get in here with a 13mm socket on a ratchet. And you get these bolts from the inside. Come on. Fun stuff. These bolts, they thread into the retainer here for the parking brake cable. So it's all pre-threaded, no nuts to worry about. A lot of fun. I think I'll stop now. All right, back at this just a little bit more here. A better wrench. All right, get these bolts out. That's one. That's two. And then the spring just slips right out. Simple. Okay, back at it, and I want to show you the big O-ring that sits inside the neck of the spring. This one's in really good shape. It's not designed to seal air, so you can reuse it, which I usually do. But I always like to use some good, high-quality O-ring grease on my O-rings to keep them supple and keep them well lubricated. Keeps them from drying out. And I'll just lube that up there. And that looks like fun, doesn't it? Anyway, I'll sit that in the neck of the new air spring. Sits right in there, and the solenoid sits down and kind of press fits against that to hold it in place so it doesn't rattle. Okay, now time to put the new spring in. There's the bolt holes on the bottom, so I'll take that and I'll set that in the bolt holes. Oh, one thing I want to note too is you notice the spring is wrapped all the way down around that pedestal with a little roll in it. Never, ever unroll that thing to show the band. Otherwise, the spring ain't going to work. So just make sure you all know that. I think most of you wouldn't do it, but you never know. Anyway, stick it in here, line up the holes. kind of depress the spring since it does move around. And the first thing you want to do is attach it to the upper mount. This ring only fits one way. So you just got to get up in here, line up all the this can be tough. Well, I've got the bolts tightened up, so the spring is completely mounted. Last step is to lubricate up the O-rings and reinstall the solenoid in the top of the spring. Now, everyone says every time you replace them, replace the O-rings. Well, guess what, folks? 10 years I've been working on these air suspension systems. As long I look at the O-rings, if they don't look damaged, I just lube them and reuse them. And you know what? I've never had a problem. So that's what I'm going to do now. Make sure I get some of my good old O-ring lube. Now, one thing about the two O-rings, there's a plastic washer in between. Well, you can't see it here, but there's a plastic washer in between. You want to make sure that the O-rings are on either side of that plastic washer, not on one side or the other, and don't remove the plastic washer. Make sure it's all together there. Right now I'm going to lube this up. Some good O-ring lube. Keep those O-rings nice and lubricated. They look beautiful. Now, the other big O-ring is in there. The mounting seating O-ring is in there, so stick it back in the hole. Come on. Go down to the first stop, twist a little, down to the second stop, twist it in to lock it. And then all you got to do is put your C-clamp back on and it's ready to air the tire. Or should I say, air the spring. Okay, it looks like I've lined up the first bolt. So I can stick that through. And just to add a little more to the back. So I can stick this bolt through. There we go. Bolts are in. Now I just gotta line up the bolts with the bracket so we screw it all back together again. Yeah, the springs are looking really nice. That's how springs should be. That's how they should be. Come over here and take another look. There we go. Looking real nice. Looking nice. Now I think I'm ready to put my tires back on and put it on the ground. One more time here. Yep, they're looking good. That's all there is to it. Oh, again, folks, I finally got both of my brand new R-nuts installed here in the rear of my SE. Now, generally when I work on an air suspension system, I like to replace one part at a time so that I know that I'm not, that way I can figure out where failures are without screwing things up. But this time I decided to do both springs at the same time for ease and for showing you guys what to do. Now that they're in and the car's still hanging in the air, some of you might think, well, time to put the tires on, drop the car down on the ground and turn the suspension on. Wrong! While you still have the car in the air and the tires off, what you need to do is to test the system and actually put air in these springs before you make it support the car. And I know everyone says, hey, if you got the car on jacks, you're not supposed to have the suspension system on. Well, that's a rule, but every rule has an exception. What I'm going to do, one little trick for all of you to know, is that as long as you have a door open, either the driver door or the passenger door, the air suspension system will rise, but it will not fall. Because as long as the door is open, the system will not let air out. It will only let air in. So what I'm going to do, of course, is turn on my ignition. And what I've done is I've got the suspension hanging completely down on the ground, or actually it is suspended at its full height down. And I noticed too that the R-knot springs have these kind of bends in them. What I think is happening to those of you who have had brand new R-knots fail on you, I think the problem is that with no air in them, you've put your car down on the ground, the things have contorted, and then when you try to blow them up, they just go all over the place and have a bad problem. So we're going to avoid that, because I now have the ignition on, and I'm going to turn my system on. Okay. Well, the system is now active, and we don't hear anything. That's because everything appears to be trim according to the computer. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start jacking up the rear until it gets to a point where it starts to put air in it. And then when that happens, we'll watch what happens to these springs. Let's see here, before I go any farther, what are they looking like? I don't like the looks of that, but see what happens. Take a look over here. Yeah, they're a little bit contorted, but let's see what happens when we pop this thing up enough to start. Oh, it started. It has started. Ooh, ooh. Hey. The springs are inflating, and they're inflating straight. That's a good thing. That's what you got to do. Oh, well, look. Aha. It is shut off. Let's try it again. Look at that. All right, I got the upper ring locked in place on this air spring. Now I got to figure out how to get these, get the bolt holes down. What I'm going to have to do here is jack up the rear end a little bit so I can line up those bolts. Yeah, this can be tedious.